All right, today we're tackling a huge question. Has the financial industry gotten so big that it's actually hurting the very system it's supposed to help? We're going to dig into how an industry that was designed to serve the economy might just be, well, eating it instead.
So let's just dive right in with a question to get you thinking. Seems pretty obvious, right? Buying the actual product, the Cybertruck, should be better for the company. But you'll see that in today's economy, the logic isn't nearly that simple. Hang with me on this one, and we'll come back to it at the very end.
To really get why that question is so tricky, we first have to understand the sheer scale of what's happened to the financial industry. I mean, it hasn't just grown a little bit, it's morphed into a completely different beast than it was just a few decades ago.
I mean, just look at this graph. It's wild. Back in the 80s, all the assets held by firms like hedge funds and private equity were worth about 40% of the entire US economy. Today, that number has just exploded to 200%. It's 5 times bigger relative to the economy. And if you want to put a real number on it, just to wrap your head around the scale, in the US alone, the total value of all financial assets, stocks, bonds, all of it, is a mind-bending $145 trillion. That is just a staggering figure. And this growth isn't coming from your friendly neighborhood bank. Nope. It's a whole new zoo of highly specialized firms. A lot of these didn't even exist 30 years ago. Their whole game is to use really complex strategies to turn money into more money, often without creating a single new product or building a single new factory. And boy, are they good at that game. The result is what you see here. The financial industry now pulls in a record 21% of all corporate profits in the entire US economy. Just think about that for a second. More than a fifth of all profits are going to an industry that, for the most part, doesn't actually make anything tangible. Okay, so what happens when an industry gets this huge and this profitable? Well, it starts to change the rules for everybody else. It fundamentally shifts what companies prioritize. Suddenly, making things can feel less important than making the numbers look good. In the textbook version of capitalism, the role of finance is supposed to be super simple and super important. It's this classic story, right? A farmer needs money to buy some land and seeds. A bank connects them with someone's savings. The farmer grows food, pays back the loan, and everybody wins. The economy grows. But that simple, ideal story, it doesn't quite capture what's happening now. The modern reality is that an already successful company, our corporate farm, is more likely to take out a loan not to buy a new tractor, but to buy back its own stock. The goal has shifted from producing more to producing a higher share price. So how does this financial engineering even work? Well, it's pretty straightforward. A company uses its cash, or sometimes even borrows money, to buy its own shares off the market. With fewer shares available, the price of the remaining ones tends to go up. And boom, financial metrics look amazing, even though the company didn't actually earn another dollar or sell a single extra product. And this quote just nails it. When companies are borrowing money just to repurchase their own stock, they stop acting like producers and start acting more like investment funds. And the real problem is that's money that isn't being spent on research and development, on innovation, on the future. So, okay, if the big established companies are busy playing these financial games, it really begs the question, who is funding actual innovation anymore? Where are all the next big ideas coming from? It's a really important question, right? Who's footing the bill for all the cool new tech and the big scientific breakthroughs? Because when you look at the data, the answer might not be who you think. So it turns out a huge chunk of it is funded by you, the taxpayer. Government grants and subsidies to private companies have gone up by more than 4 times since the year 2000. The other major source is a tiny, specialized corner of finance called venture capital. And this represents a massive, massive shift. It used to be that government-funded research happened in public labs, and the discoveries, the intellectual property, belonged to everyone. Now, we often use taxpayer money to incentivize private companies, but when they invent something, they own it. They're the only ones who can profit from it. And as for venture capital firms, they have their own very specific goal. It's not always about building the most solid, best long-term business. It's about funding companies that are easy to sell off into the financial markets for a quick profit, sometimes before they even have a real product.
Okay, so this all sounds very big picture, very systemic. But here's the crucial part. How do all these massive changes on Wall Street actually trickle down and impact your life, your wallet? Because believe me, they do. Well, think about it. For decades now, wages for a lot of people haven't really kept up with the cost of living. And finance has stepped right into that gap. We're more reliant on debt than ever, from mortgages and student loans all the way down to that buy now, pay later button at checkout. If you can't earn enough to spend, finance offers a way and takes a cut.
And this brings up a fascinating point about where most people actually build their wealth. It's not really in the stock market. The top 10% of people own almost all of that. No, for pretty much everyone else, the single biggest asset they will ever own is their house.
So why is that? Why is the primary wealth building tool for the average family a single physical asset that they happen to live in? Well, the answer tells you a lot about how the financial system is really structured for most people. It really just boils down to lending. The entire system is designed to make it incredibly easy for you to get a massive loan, a mortgage, to buy a house. It's much harder to get a loan to buy stocks, and all that available credit for housing helps prop up prices, meaning we spend a huge chunk of our lives paying off debt on the one major asset we're all encouraged to own. Which brings us all the way back to our first question about Elon Musk. Buying a $100,000 Cybertruck, that might only make about $4,000 in actual profit for Tesla. But buying $100,000 of Tesla stock, that directly boosts the share price. We're in an economy where the story about future success can be way more valuable than actual current success. And that leaves us with this final, really powerful metaphor. Finance is supposed to be the oil that lubricates the engine of the economy, keeping it all running smoothly. But when the oil itself starts using up 20% of the engine's fuel just to pump itself around, you really have to ask yourself, is the system still working the way it was designed to? Or has the tool become the master?